Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 13. As always, let us start with what we'll be doing for today. Today, we will look at file IO, which is a more technical term or a syntax for, so to speak, for inputs and outputs. So this IO that you see here is just the short form for input, not in out, input and output. So that is how we will say something like this in programming terms. So IO for short. And that is how we write data to files and read data also from files. So how we can get the contents of a file or how we can write our own content to a particular file. So let us get into Python and then see how we can do that. Here I have my file created. And usually how we take input from the user, or let's say how we get data into our program, we have been doing that through variables and also the input function, which takes input from the user. What if the data is stored in a particular file? So how do we now read the contents of that file? So that is what we will explore today. So let us get a file to read from. And so what I'll do is, inside the folder, I usually create a folder for each day. So you can see the folders here listed. So inside the day 13 folder, what I want to do is to, when I open it up, you only see the Python file for the day, sorry. Sorry about that. You only see the Python file for the day and nothing else. So if I right click and then choose new now and then go to file, I'll have our file creation window pop up. Here I can type a name here, maybe my file, and the extension of this file that we'll be creating is .txt. So make sure you have this particular file extension there also. The reading and writing can be from different files, but our focus for today is text files. Tomorrow onwards, we will also explore how we can read and write from other data sets that are a little complex than raw text files in this case. So I will hit enter, and that will also be created for me. Please don't forget the .txt at the end. It is very, very important. And so this is a file on our computer. If I right click on it and then scroll down, I'll see open in, and then under the open in, I can choose the Explorer option. What this one will do is to open up the file on my computer. So that did open on the other window. Let me bring it in. So you see here that this is the folder on my desktop. That is where we created the project. And inside the day 13 folder, if I come back by one step, you see that all the folders are here. So this is my file that I just created. Let me make the font, the size is large. I think that should be inside view and then extra large. Yep. So this should be very visible for you to see. You see something like this, your file, forget the icon, that is VS Code doing its thing. And then my file also is created here. Okay. So this is what we read the content from into our Python file. But for now, there's nothing inside. So what I'll do is that I will copy one of my favorite poems and then paste it inside. I have that one there in advance. And so you can get any text that you want and then put it inside. Anything. This is Itsy Busy Spider. It's one of my favorite poems. So in case you want to read data from this file, in fact, let me name it properly. And if you want to rename in Python, you can right-click on the file and then go to what we call a refactor. Under refactor, you will see rename. which you can also do by the shortcuts given. And then this rename window will pop up. And here I want to name it Itsy, because that is the, maybe Itsy spider, that it will match the poem. I may bring in another file for demonstration. That is why I want to name this one with the proper name. So how do I now get these details inside here? Well, that is very, very simple. As we have realized, almost everything in Python is very, very simple. We still need a variable to hold that data. So what we can do is maybe say my file, set that to be equal to, and just as we use the input to take input from the user, there's also another function called open that you can use to open a file, just like that. So if I wanted to show you that, but I think it has already popped up. These are the arguments, so the parameters that we have to pass. The first one of interest is file. I'm trying to, looks like the screen annotation tool I'm using doesn't really want to work with pop-ups, and so you may have to bear with me. The file, the first one is the path to the file that you want to read. So it's not just, you don't just type in the file, it's the path. The path, that is a more technical way of saying where the file is located on your computer. So if I come back to the folder where files were, let me close this one, we don't need it. You see this one? If you're on Windows, if you look at the top, you see this PC, local disk, and all the other stuff up to day 13. This is the path to the folder where the file is. So if you want to get a file path or the file's full path, what you can do is to click on the file, make sure it is selected. And among the options that you see at the top here under the Home tab is the copy path. When you click on it, it looks like nothing has happened, but the file path has been copied. So if I come back to any text editor, I can do Control V to paste, and this is what we call now the path of the file. Great. So what I'll do now is to create a variable called file path, and then I will paste this thing here. It already comes as a Python string, so you don't have to worry about that. It is quite long because of where it is located. And so in here, what I have to do is to pass in first the file path. And so I can say file path. But we found out that it was asking for other things also. The opener, the close FD, and the new line, which are a little bit more advanced than what we have to know today, at least for the purpose of introduction to file IO. And so I will skip those ones for now. But the two most important ones that you have to take note of is the file and then the mode. The mode is the mode in which you want to interact with the file. So if I quickly come back to the PowerPoint, I think I can show you that one better. Here I again summarize it for you. There are more than the modes that I'm showing you now. Python supports more than all the ones I'm showing you, but these are the ones that you have to know at least for the start. The rest are a little advanced, but you can explore further, and then as you take this bootcamp or the things you learn in the bootcamp, a step ahead. So there's a mode called R, which we indicate it by R, the literal string R, lowercase r. And what that one does is it opens a file for reading only. Think of it like you have a file on your computer. Like this file now that I have here, if I double click on it, what I'm telling my computer is that one to open in the other window. Let me bring it back. What I'm telling my computer now is that, okay, fine, this is a file. Look through the operating system or the apps that I have on my PC. Whichever software is capable of reading the content of this file and visualizing it or showing it to me clearly, use it to open it. So usually what you have set as your default is what will be used to open it. And in this case, for flat text files like this, I think the notepad on Windows can do that job. If you're using Mac OS, when you double click it, I think you should have another software equivalent to something like this, like a text editor, to open it up for you. And so what I did was to double click and open the file. Now I have opened the file now. What I am doing now is visually looking at the content. So I can say I am reading the contents of this file. And so how do I get to do that programmatically, so to speak? This mode is what will help me. So if I want to tell Python that I am reading the file only, I'm opening it just to see what is inside, I have to pass in this arrow mode, and then that will let Python know that, okay, I want to read it. And the other statement says the pointer is placed at the beginning of the file, and this is the default mode. The pointer is just the blinking cursor that shows, just comes and goes just to show you that, okay, this is a place where you can type text, or this is where if you type any character or hit any key on your keyboard, this is where the character you want to type will be shown. And the other mode too is W, which opens the file for writing only. So in this case, you can think of it like editing the file. Okay, there is another one called A, which is for appending. What the W does is, if the file does not exist, it will create it and write inside it. But if it already exists, it will replace the content that is in the file, the current content, with the new content. It will not add it to it. It will delete whatever is inside, if I'm not being so technical, and add the new stuff. But the A will also create the file if it doesn't exist, but will not delete the old version or the old content, will keep it and then add the new content you want to add at the end of it. So it's just like append using Python lists. And it also turns out that we can add maybe what we can call modifiers, this plus symbol here, to the modes so that they will do something different. In the case where I want to both read and write, I can say R plus, and this will be like the read mode, but it will add an extra functionality for me to be able to write also to the file. I can also do A plus, which also allows me to read together with the appending, and then the W plus also allows me to both read and write. So you can think of the pluses as just some modifiers that just allows you to also read, apart from the strict ones that the single characters allow you to do. So let's see how this thing goes. So this one, I will not actually type mode. That is, okay, let me just type it in. Mode is R because I want to read the file. And now you see PyCharm is suggesting another thing called encoding. I think one of the sessions, I introduced you to what we call the ASCII table, which is the character encoding, which is just, if I'm not being too technical with the file encoding, you know that computers, they understand binary. So there should be a way between us and the computer to come into an agreement that, okay, you don't understand my characters. You only understand 0s and 1s. So if I type A, then your representation of A in 0s and 1s will be this. So the encodings kind of sit between us and the computer. It understands our language and is able to translate the text from human readable formats to the format that the computer can understand using some standard practices like that. So for instance, the uppercase A, I think that is 65, using the ASCII encoding, so to speak. And you can search for the ASCII table. The name is ASCII, like this. So ASCII table. You get to know all the various encodings that they employ to represent several characters. There is also the Unicode, which is more general and modern, and other ones that if you explore, you may find out. So mode is R. The encoding is I think, set to UTF-8 by default, and that should do for our purposes now. But you can see something here. If I try to now run this code, I'm not saying there will be an error, but maybe there will be an error. And yes, there was an error. It says, this is a particular error that you may be seeing a lot in your code when you want to read files. It will come at that particular time when you want to read files, when you have declared path in your computer. And let's see what it says. It says syntax error, Unicode error. I just mentioned Unicode as one of the encoding systems, so to speak. So the encoding, where is that one? Didn't show up. So one of the encoding systems, apart from iOS Unicode, it says this particular thing may not really make sense to you, may not really understand it, but it says codec can decode bytes in position, blah, 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 blah. But if you look closely, you see that there's a backslash and there's some not very familiar text following, which we don't really understand. We can't really decode what this one means, but we know that problem may be coming from where there is a backslash, because that is it's after the backslash and some representation, which maybe is an encoded value in the computer's memory, which represents some human readable character that you and I don't know. So at least we know that we are looking for an error that may occur or is occurring around a backslash. If you look at my file path variable here, you will see that the colors are not uniform. The users is white, the C is yellow. If I come a little towards the right, the 21 is now blue and all that. So usually as a string, if I declare any string, my string, let me just say it's hello world. Based on the theme I'm using, you should see that all of them should be yellow. So that should tell me that something is wrong somewhere, or something is not being read as a string properly. That happens when we have backslashes. Remember, I told you the other day that if you want to print something on a new line, you can use the backslash n. Sorry, you can use a backslash n. There are other escape characters, so to say, in programming other than the backslash n. That this particular syntax here, backslash n, means something very, very specific in any programming language, at least the ones I know. If I type something like backslash t also, that also has its own meaning. There's backslash s, I think there is backslash r, and many other ones you will get to know if you search for them. So it's maybe that backslash u is also a particular notation in the Python programming language, and the backslash 2 may also have a particular meaning in the Python programming language. So even though this is the path to our file, so supposing this Tommy is just n, that means that you see that part 2 is also yellow now, blue now. So what will happen if we pass this string to any function like the read or the open is that it will think this is getting to a new line. So it will evaluate this part, and then all the rest will be evaluated to a new line. So the fact that 21 is also blue means that it is reading like it is a string, but actually it is not a string in the computer's memory. So what you can do to prevent these things from happening is to, just like you construct F strings, but this time around you can, if we are not being too technical, you can say R strings. Just put R, the lowercase r, in front of your string. So if you declare paths, be sure to do that. And now you can see that everything is yellow, which means we have no problem. When I go ahead and run, our exit code is 0. We don't have any Unicode errors to deal with. So now we can read our file. Fantastic. Now we have the contents of the file. Like you have told Python that we are opening a file. We have opened it. So what do we want to do with the file? We can say my file dot read. There are various options or to read the contents of a file. So let us explore all of them. And in order to be able to print out the details of the file, we have to now assign this one to a variable. So maybe you can say details equal to my file.read, because if we hover over this, the documentation is not really doing us good. But what this one is doing is that it will read all the content of the file and then bring it to us. So if I print details and then run the code now, I'll see that all my files content is now listed here. So there is, of course, I'm reading the itsy spider, so the poem is here. Great. So the read will return all the contents of the file. The read returns all the file contents. There is another one also called read line. Read line, what read line is do is that it will read only one line. So if we call read line for the first time, what it will do is that it will read the first line for us. So if I run this code again, I should only see the first line, which is itsy busy spider climbed up the water spout. So read line returns only the first line, or it reads the file one line at a time. There is another one called read lines, which you can think of as the plural version of the read line. So let us see what that one also has to offer. What that one does is that it breaks down the file line by line and then puts all the lines as list elements. So it will return every line for you, all of them inside a list. So you can see that it has broken it down. This here we see is the first sentence. And then see that we know that it broke it into lines because of the \n here. And then down came the rain and washed the spider out. This one too is another line, the next line, and all that. But if you also look closely, you will find out that even the spaces that are intentionally put in the file, it also read them as lines. So if I open the file again, you see that there are some spaces. So after every stanza, there's a space. See, my cursor is blinking. That means that it's an area that text can go to, but I intentionally left it blank. So that is the spaces that it is reading as \n, because that is actually what it is in the computer's memory. So read lines will bring you all the file contents to break down line by line and put all the lines in one list for you. So you will decide which one you want to use, whether you want to get all the content at once and use it for something, for some display or something, or maybe you want to analyze the file line by line. You can, in that case, say can use the for loop to map over it actually. So what is happening for line in my file? What I want to do is to print line. So if I run it this way, this is, did I use read lines? Okay, yes. So that one too will work. So it will already give it to me as a list and I can print each one of them out. And the reason I think we are seeing the multiple spaces in here is that by default, this print statement, this print function, it's a function, you can look at it that way. It also takes in parameters. So whatever we are passing in here are the parameters that the print function takes. If we hover over it, documentation, be fast, you see that it takes in some parameters. There's the values which we usually pass in or have been passing in all this while, but there are other ones that you have not explored. There's a separator, there is the end. And you can see that the separator is by default not an empty, it's just a space. You can see there is a space. And then there's one called end, which is always defaulted to \n. So whatever we print to our terminal, the computer actually adds, or by default, Python adds \n to it. Whatever we print, whatever we have been printing till now, by default, because this parameter, this default parameter is set to \n, it adds it to us here by default. So if we want to prevent that behavior, we can say end. Sorry. We know that we can override default parameters. So we can say end equal to empty. I'm not now expecting that it will be in extra unnecessary spaces. So now you see that the spaces that initially it will print the itsy busy spider and then give a space before coming to print this one. And when it gets to this place where there's a space, it will actually leave a space and another space and all this time because of how the default end was set. But now I say that, okay, I want my end to be empty. So it is not going to the next line again. But rather what we now see as next lines are made possible because of the for loop, which iterates one line at a time. Okay, so I keep an eye on the comments. If you have a question, you can bring that up and I will answer. But usually, there is something we call file integrity error. File integrity. Do I get a spelling called integrity error? You get this error when you have opened the file, you are editing it, you have not saved it, and you want to open the same file again. You can try that if you have, let's say if you're using a Microsoft Word, just try and open a file or any text editing application, whether Notepad or anything, WordPad, open a file, start typing or editing the text, don't save it, and then go onto your computer and try opening the same file again. For Microsoft Word, it will tell you that it can only open it in read mode. Some softwares will prompt you of that because you cannot have the same file open in the computer's memory at 2 times and all being edited upon at once. That is not possible because whatever we do here is being allocated a memory in the a space in the computer's memory. So this file here, the computer knows where it is. So once it is working on it, it will, in order to protect the integrity of the file, it will, if I'm not being too technical, like put some indication or say some padlock or some notes on the file that, hey, this file is being edited. So any other software that comes and tries to access the file will not be able to open it in edit mode. It can only read the contents of the file. That is the previous contents which has not yet been saved. But once you save it, that lock or note kind of changes or releases to, okay, now I am editable. Okay. So if we read the file this way, it is best practice that after we are done doing whatever we want with the file, we should just say my file dot close so that we release the file from the memory. So that if any other application is maybe using the file to be able to use it. So that is the best practice. After you open the file, do whatever you want to do with it, just release the file from memory. But if you think this syntax is just so complex, Python, the creators of Python thought of this in advance for you so that you don't, we may mostly always forget the file.close. Like you saw, I forgot in the initial stage. I was reading and we are seeing the output, but I forgot how to close the file. This will happen, but like if you are in a hurry to do something, your mind will not really be on the close to close the file. So in order to prevent that and those integrity errors and issues that may even crash your application, they thought of it in advance so that you prepend the open with the with statement. So you can say with open, and now you can pass in that the file equal to file path, and then we can now say that the mode, looks like my intelligence is a bit slow today. The mode is still the read mode, that is all we, and then now you say as maybe any name you want here, also as some file. Think of this one is like a variable name, so it can actually be anything if you want it that way. So, but I think some file is a more proper term. And then now we can perform all the actions that we want to use to read the file. So you can say some file dot read, but you know that before we can show it, we have to store it, or we can print it directly, but to be able to use it for any other meaningful operation, we can store it. So we can say that the result is equal to some file dot read, and then we can print results. So what this one will do is that it will work just like what you've seen to show us the file, but what this syntax will do is that after it exits this with block, it closes the file automatically. So the with will close the file automatically if the operation is done. So after it executes the last line indented under it, it will close the file automatically for you. So it will call the file dot close automatically for you. So even if you forget, you will still be on the safer side. Of course, all the other methods also work here. So read line work. If we run it, you should see the first line only. And then read lines will also work. So that one too should give us the list of all the lines in our file. Okay. You see here that I went to copy the path from the computers, from my file explorer, and pasted it here. This is the full path to the file on my computer from the root disk, which is the C, and all the nested directories I have to, you know, a directory is a folder. So all the nested directories I have to open before I get to this file.txt. This is what we call the absolute path. So you will be hearing it in some places, the absolute path. That is also to say, is more technical word for full path, which is the full path of the file starting from your root directory, which for my case on Windows is the C. So the C drive or the C directory, you enter the users, your username, and then blah, 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 and the rest continues. This is the absolute path or the full path. But it turns out that there's another path system or path type, which we call the relative path. Relative path, which is the path that is defined based on where the file is being called. Sorry. So that path is defined based on where the file is being called and not from the root directory. What do I mean by that? If I go ahead and expand my structure here, you see that this file is C spider that I'm reading is the same place as my d13.py. So what I can do is that if I want to declare it as an absolute path, let me get rid of this for now. In most cases, you will not want to declare absolute paths, because if you do that and you have to export your algorithm, your software to other people to use, this path is only on my PC. Fine, if there's somebody somewhere who has named the computer or the current user on the computer Tommy, like I've done, and has a folder called desktop, a folder called 21 days Python, a folder called d13, and a file called etcspider.txt. The person can run this script and will not get into any error. But if I send you this file as it is and you run it on your PC, even if I give you this file here so that you put it in your projects folder on the desktop, you get an error because you are not called Tommy, or your computer's name is not Tommy. So in this case, the relative path will come in very handy. And as I said, that is defined based on the position of the file that is calling for that particular file. In our case, we can say itsy spider.txt, just like this, because it is in the same folder. It's in the same folder. So if I run it now, I should get the same result like I have been using the full path for, or the absolute path for, because this is in the same folder. And in fact, if I hover over it, any intelligent editor like Python or VS Code or any other ones that you have should give you the absolute path of the file. So what it's telling us here is that even though we have given a relative path, because it already knows the position of the file that it is running, if I come to the run console now, and now we focus on the first two things which we have not really explained, I think now is the best time to do. You see C users, let me highlight it here. This thing that I've highlighted, you remember one of the days I went into the folder, opened a different terminal, and typed in another syntax to run the file. So PyCharm itself cannot run our file. It has to use Python. That is why it calls the Python from my computer. So this is where my Python is installed. It's in the virtual environment venv. But if you look at towards the end, you see python.exe. That means that it's calling Python. And when you call Python, you also have to call the file that you want to now run with Python. In this case, the file that you want to run with Python is this file. So you see that I don't really give so many instructions, but it looks like PyCharm or Python, which is now running or executing our script, already knows that the file that I'm running is inside this long path, and it's called day13.py inside the 13 folder on my desktop, somewhere inside 21 days PyCharm folder. So it already knows the location, if not being too technical, of the file we are running. So if I now say simply that itsy spider.txt, it intelligently looks through the folder where it is. Is that file there? If it is there, it's inside the runtime, or like during runtime, sorry. What it may do, I'm not saying that what it does, what it may do is that it will prepend the rest of the path that we did not bring to it, so that the itsy spider like this will now become something like this inside its memory. I'm not saying that is what it does, but I'm strongly proposing that that is something like this should be done, because the computer actually needs the full path to read the file. Okay. So, or in some editors, this may not work, but if I type dots and then slash and then itsy spider.txt, it is also valid to express the path if it is inside the same place. And what is this dot slash that I have typed? Well, in programming, or most of the times where we have been using the dots, we call it on some objects to call a method of that object, like some file here, dot read lines, sorry. But if we are declaring paths, like a file path like this, when we say dots, it means the current directory or the current folder. So in this case, the dots is equal to this. So the dots that I typed here will now be equal to this. The creators of the terminal or the languages thought that, okay, fine, if there's a way to, because I already know that, oh, this file is where I'm running it from. I'm running it from the day13 folder. If I type dots, it means get the location of this current file where I've typed the dot inside, which is the day13.py file, which is located in this folder. So the dots will now be translated to this 4 parts here. And so when I add the slash spider.txt, it will complete to the full file. And in all cases, in all the times, I will recommend that you use the dot slash, even if it's in the same folder, instead of just typing the name of the file raw like that. Okay. So imagine if I had another folder here, or directory, it's technically called folder, like I've created here. So this folder is inside the day 13 folder. If I now drag this EC spider in, didn't go, I think I'll have a prompt refactor, but I'll tell you something. You see that Python intelligently brought the folder name first before the file, because now it is not directly inside the day 13 folder, it's inside folder, which is inside the 13. That is where I'll find the file. So again, I recommend that you do dot slash folder and spider.txt. If I run it, it should give us the same output as before. So this syntax is not really difficult to grasp. Just know where the file is. You can represent that current directory by a dot, and then the folder name and all that. And you only do this and only this, let me overemphasize this one, if the file you are running is in any way related to the project, like in our case, the 21 Days Python project. We have the file, the Python file, and the file in the same folder. So we can use this relative path. If the file is located at a very different place on your computer, you can't use a relative path. You have to now copy the full path. There are other ways to go around it. We will explore it when we get to the OS module in Python, how to navigate our operating system from Python. But for now, just know that it is only when the file is somehow close or related, maybe they are all in a parent folder. There is a big folder that houses all of them. Or in this case, the file itself is in a place where, or there's a folder, in our case, that is containing the file of interest, that our file can just go and say dot folder dot the file name. Other than that, if it's on a completely different path, use the absolute path to do that. Again, prepending it with R is necessary to prevent any Unicode errors. Okay, let me see if there are questions, because I think I am saying a lot of things with a lot of technical stuff and some things that really might be confusing upon first grasp. If you have a question, please drop it down. If you're watching this after stream too on YouTube, you can drop your question in the comments and I will come and address it for you. So that is it about reading files. Yes, we couldn't explore the other moves because they are for reading, of course. They are not for reading, unless maybe you do W plus or A plus or something like that. So when we get to the writing of files too, we will explore the W and the A. But you know from the slide I showed you that R plus will also allow me to read the file. In fact, if I make it A plus, just because of the plus, it will also allow me to read it. But you see now it even returned an empty string. So that will work, but that is not what is used to read contents of a file. So if you want to read the file and get the content, you know that these A plus didn't even work. Let's try the W plus. Fine. Let's remove the plus. I'm thinking it will throw an error. I don't usually do this, but I'm thinking it should throw an error. And it did. I don't do that because I know that if I want to read it, I have to use R as the mode. Usually errors may be something you will not know, but the last line is the most important one, at least for Python. It says IO supported unsupported operation. That means you are doing something that is not supported by the read method. It says not readable. That means that the file is not readable. So it only becomes readable when you have R or R plus. Okay. Why is it now returning? Oh, great. That let me. I told you from the slide that the writes will we'll delete all the old contents and put in the new contents. We called W, but we did not give it any content to write to our file. So now my poem is gone. So if I do undo reload from this, that it didn't even work. So I have to copy it from somewhere and bring it. So that is what the write will do. Before you use the write, make sure if you want to be really safe, I will recommend the append. Unless you really want to overwrite the old content, delete it, and then put in the new content. In the case where you don't have a backup like I do, you find yourself that you've lost all your file and you can't undo it also. Okay, so let us now look at the methods of now writing to files. So I will, writing data to file. The syntax stays the same. The recommended way to open or interact with files, just that we change the mode now to W. And let me now go inside the file and now copy the first stanza, or maybe the first two stanzas, and then select everything and delete it. So I want to get an empty file so that when you write it, you see that it's actually been written. Or, oh yeah, that will work. So I will create two variables here, stanza 1, stanza plus 1, stanza 1. That should be equal to, and then I want to put, because it is a multi-line string, I can do something like this. It's accepted in Python. I can paste it in like this. So triple quotes beginning, triple quotes closing. But I want to declare another one called stanza 2, so that will have the second stanza. So stanza 1, stanza 2, so triple quotes, and then paste in stanza 2 also. Okay, so this is what I want to write to the file or to insert into the file. I will open the file as always. I think this folder should just delete it and make it, but it's okay. I think that's all good. Now I'm in W mode, which means I want to write. So instead of, okay, maybe we can bring the reading also. So what I'll say is some file, because that is the reference to the file that we have opened. That is the reference variable. So if you want to perform any operation on the file that you have opened, we use this reference variable here, which in my case is some file. So some file dot write. And what do I want to write? I want to write stanza 1. There's a way I can keep the file side by side. So if I double click on this one to open it and I drag it far to the right, I have the two of them at the same time displayed. So now you see that it's empty, and I'm not even put my cursor here so that you think I pasted it there. I'll right click inside my file here and then run. Okay, it says not readable. We got an error, but we know that we have also seen that the output is generated. And so now let's examine our error. We have now written just the first stanza to the file using the write function. What is happening here is that after writing it, we are trying to read and print the results. But the W is only for writing and not for reading. So in the case where we want to see the contents that we have written, you have guessed right, you have to add the plus to modify the W so that now to be W plus. I think my read is just too big all the time. So I'll delete the content that was written and then now go ahead and run my file again. It is written, I did not get an error, only that I got an empty string to be returned, which is not exactly what we were expecting. And that is also because this W is not really the standard for reading files. So in the case where you want to also, we can use the R plus rather, that what will give us, because that is the authorized mode to read files on our computer. That one to return an empty string. So I think this one is a bug that we have to fix. This is not what the case should be. Okay. So you saw that when I was typing the right, another one came called right lines. The right lines, if I hover over it, I think the documentation should pop up. This one takes in an I trouble. So if I have a list of sentences or a list of lines, so to speak, like you saw how the output of the read lines, when we called it on the when we read the file through read lines, it gives us all the contents line by line in a list. If I have a list like that, I can use write lines to write all of them at once to a file. But we don't have something like that, so we cannot do that. But if we go ahead and modify this a bit, and that means I will have to get my backup of the poem and then paste it in so that I have all the lines. So let me now use it, the read mode, and then comment out this right line. So we get the contents in a list like this. So this is a list like this is what we are looking for. So can safely copy it from the terminal, and our file is really growing long. So maybe you can just say lines equal to, and then I'll paste it. It's a list of sentences or lines, so to speak. So a very long one. We don't have to worry about that. So in the case where you want to now write to it, so let me go ahead and clear all the contents once again, and then put them side by side, collapse this place for space, and then now I can now get rid of this, which is now giving us some backs, and then say write lines, and inside this one will be lines, because that is the list of lines we want to write. If I nearly forgot, I didn't change this one to W, would have given us an error, maybe. So if I go W, process finished with exit code 0, and if I now expand the file, I see that it has written all the lines of all the stanzas in there. So if we have something like this, a list of lines you want to write to any particular file, you can use the right lines to achieve that objective. Okay. So that is it also about writing to files. And the next one that we have to explore now is appending. And so I'll go ahead, clear everything. And then, okay, I will not delete the lines. I'll maintain this. And then what I'll do is I'll say some file dot write line. Now I'll be using not the right lines, right line, because we want to write it, not even right line, right, just write. So that will take the data, the stream of text or characters just as it appears. So just as it appears here, and put them in the file. So it will automatically figure out where to put the space, where to put the new line and all that. That will not be our headache. So I will first write stanza 1 like this, and then run it. This thing is just so big. You see that it came. It starts, that's the stanza 1. You see busy spider climb up the water spout, down came the rain and washed the spider out. And if I go ahead and let's just say that I want to write stanza 2. Stanza 2, so thinking that it will add up to this one. So let me run the file and see. It did write the stanza 2. but it didn't add it to the existing data. It deleted what is already in there and inserted the new one. This is fine. You may write programs that require you to do this. You have to replace old data with new. But in our case, we want to now keep the state of the old one and then add the new, like we use the plus equal to operator. And what will help us do that is the A, or the append mode. So now if I go ahead and say stanza 1 here now, run, it will insert this one for me. And then if I change this one to stanza 2, you see that it didn't behave like the right. It kept the old content and added a new content to it. So that is what the append does. It adds it to the end of the content, just like the append does on lists. Okay. So I think there's the last thing for us to explore as far as these things are concerned. Then we close chapter on today. Let me now move this file up but still maintain the old folder configuration, the .folder /ACBZ Spider. So I have moved the file from where it is, but I've still maintained the path. If you are guessing, then you guess right, because this file does not exist on my computer, because inside the folder here, there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. It's an empty folder. In fact, if there was something in it, you will see some arrow at the left here, like for the day 12 and 13, because there are things inside it. So I can open it and see what's inside. But for the folder, there's nothing in there. That is why there's no arrow to the right. So if I try to read, let me just put R. After reading, let's just say we'll not do anything. So let's just put pass. And I run. The code is not running, but I have an error, which says, forget all the gibberish or the cryptic text at the start. It says file not found error. This one is among the most descriptive errors that we've ever found. It says error number 2, or whatever that one is, we don't care. But the text that follows is more readable also. It says no such file or directory, and it even tries to list the particular file or directory we are trying to access that does not exist. So when we use the read, the file must exist before we we are able to read it and read the contents. But if we use the W, let's see if we get an error. It says no such file or directory. Is it because we are passing? Let me see. And let me change this back to R and C, or R plus. I think that is what will allow me to write also. Okay, it still gave me the error. Let me change it to W. The R plus sustains the ability to help me to also write the file. So it says that the file was not found. Let me now run it with the W also. It says no such file or directory. Okay, I think it may be due to the nested option. So let me delete the folder from there, and then maybe it's called spider1.txt. Call read again, and let me see, read plus. Because for the write and append, if the file does not exist, they have to create it for us. Okay, so for the read, it still says that the file does not exist. Let me change it to W. And this time around, we didn't get an error. At first, what I wanted to show you was not working because of the folder that came in that you have to now nest into another folder. We will see how we get around that when we are dealing with the OS module. But for now, let's just keep things simple, but by putting it in the same directory. If I take you to my folder or my directory for day 13, you see that EC Spider 1 TXT is created. I did not create it here manually. The code created it. And then because it did not exist, it created it and wrote the file inside it. But if we go ahead, selected it, and I delete it, delete anyway, and I change this one to read again and run, it will throw an error because the read does not create the file if it does not exist. But we saw that the W created the file when it did not exist and did write into it. Okay. So now that this file is found, if I comment out this and then put in here pass, because you're not doing anything with the reading, and change this one to R, and I run it, I'll not get an error. I'll get a process finished with exit code 0. So now it didn't throw an error because the file exists. Okay. So let's check for the append also. So I'll go ahead and delete EC Spider 1, delete anyway, and then run. See that one also created the file and wrote into it. So that is the advantage of the two. The append and the write, they create the file if it doesn't exist and write into it. But for the read, for you to access the file, it must exist on your computer. Okay, so I know it has been a lot today. Probably you may have to watch this stream on YouTube again and ask a few questions, try your hands on it, make sure you practically understand what is going on before you get it. But if you got it on the first, on this attempt also, that is also great as well. As usual, I will allow 1 minute for questions if I have to answer any of them on air. Other than that, we'll close chapter on today and anticipate for tomorrow. Okay, so I believe there are no questions. If there are any that comes after, you know that you have to put it on the platform, the common WhatsApp platform, and the whole community will be there to answer. But if you think I should take a look at it for you, especially also, you know, you can easily message me and then I will take a look at it for you. So that will be all for today. Thank you for your time and make sure you keep on practicing. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye.